Today, I want to try something a little different, and I'm gonna go off the script, which is something I don't usually do. So, Pokemon Legends Arceus is finally out, and as you know, this is probably the most exciting game to me for the year, even beating out Bayonetta 3, which was previously the game I was most excited for. So now, I've been playing Pokemon Legends for a week, and this is my first impressions video, which is kind of funny since my first impressions video is coming about a week after I started playing, but I like to take my time with video games, so I definitely wanted to be informed of the game before I told you guys my initial thoughts, and I also just wanted to get more of a full picture of what the game is and what it has to offer. I of course will be doing a review, and I will also be doing a few discussions in groups with Kayla's Capsule and Dusty Gogoat and Veteran X Gaming, but for now, I just want to talk to you guys about how excited I am and how much fun I am having with the game because it is so good. And I'm just so glad that it is good because this is what we've been asking for the longest time. And it really feels like we finally have that. And I hope you guys all feel the same. Obviously, this might just be a me thing. From what I'm seeing, it's mostly people feeling the way I am, but I have seen a few other people not feel quite the same way. To be fair, I've noticed a few reviewers online or a few impression videos from some YouTubers who have really bad takes on the game and they have a really large audience. Like I saw this one guy who has over 1 million subscribers and he started talking about the music in the game and he was saying the music is just a few stray piano sounds, just like Breath of the Wild. And I don't know how he came to that conclusion, because the music in this game is probably the most varied I've ever heard Pokemon music be. And then there was another guy who reviewed the game and was talking about Insane Poppin', but this same guy had previously reviewed Sword and Shield and didn't talk about Poppin' in that game where it was literally 2 feet in front of you. This game, it does not have bad Poppin'. I don't know where people are trying to find criticism for this game in all the wrong places. There are flaws with the game, sure, and we will talk about those, but they're not these, and they're also not very common, nor are they very prominent. And you'll see what I mean as we continue. Now, I'm going to start talking about my opinions on certain aspects of the game, and we're going to start with graphics, because as we know, graphics are a huge point of contention in Pokemon and video games in general. So with Pokemon Legends, I think the graphics, I'm just going to come out and say it, are great, and there's really only a few things wrong with them. For example, the game, for some reason, every once in a while, aliases itself, and for those of you who don't know what aliasing is, I've talked about it in a previous analysis, but aliasing is essentially when models and assets on the screen, you can see the jagged lines that make up the models because they're not smoothed out by what's called anti-aliasing. It's a technique that is used to smooth out those jagged lines. And it saves on space instead of making higher polygonal models. It's a whole thing that I'm not going to go into now. I've explained it before. But sometimes it just reverts to being super aliased, and it just happens randomly. There's also some weird flickering that happens at nighttime, particularly when you're around a lot of trees. I don't know if it's something weird with how the lighting hits beyond the trees and into the camera. I'm really not sure. But those are really the graphical issues I've seen. I've very rarely seen Pokemon stutter and things stutter and what have you. I do have noticed that if you throw a fruit or a berry to a Pokemon in the overworld and it's really close to a tree or a ledge, the Pokemon will start spazzing out instead of eating the berry when they get close to it. But these things are very few and far between. When you really get down to it, the animations and the graphics are better more so than not, because the Pokemon have all new animations, they have turning animations, they have sleeping animations, they have animations to transition between different animations, such as getting up from sleeping and going back to sleep, and new attack animations, new stun animations, new everything. There's so many things. They have head detection or observance detection now, so you'll see their heads turn when they're looking at different things. This is something we never saw before. The Pokemon actually blink too, and it's not just like a PNG on their face, it's actual eyes on their face blinking, and they have actual mouths, and there's just so much fun detail put in. You can tell that they definitely reworked the models, and the environments also look great in my opinion. I really, especially the coastline, I really like the art style there. I've noticed that each individual area that you go to has its own kind of art style. It is still pretty cohesive across the board from one place to another, but I have noticed that they do change things up. Like the grass is a completely different art style in the coastlands than it is in the obsidian fieldlands. Like you get the sharp blades in the obsidian fieldlands, but you get these really fun, kind of unrealistic grass blades that are not sharp, they're like really round in the coastlands. It's just really fun, and I personally think it's great. The lighting is great, especially when you watch the different times of day start fading from one to the other. Morning being really beautiful in its own way, midday being my favorite because that's when everything is just very vibrant. And then of course you have the twilight hour, which they do every time it hits the evening, and it's this gorgeous golden gloss over everything. It's so pretty. And then you can just take your Pokemon out in all these little spots and just chill with them and like make a little memory there, take a few photos, take a few videos, what have you. You'll see that a lot in my footage that you're watching right now. Sometimes I just sit there and soak in the atmosphere and the environment because it's so nice. And then the Pokemon are super lively. There's a whole way that you can get them to communicate with each other, and I'm actually going to make a guide for Pokemon interactivity on this game because there's so many little details that I didn't even expect to have from taking your Pokemon out of their Pokeball. And it's not only just, having them out for fun, you can actually also use them to gather materials and do other things for you. I was shocked when I came up to this big wall that looked like I should have Rock Smash to break it, right? And I'm like, what happens if I throw my Pokemon out here at this big wall? And they just start pounding away at this big wall, and it opens up a new area or a cave or something. And the game is loaded with things like that. I was genuinely shocked, and that's exactly what I was asking for. It's funny, I mentioned it a lot in a previous video a long time ago, back when I was just getting started on growing here on YouTube. I made a video about how I wanted environmental puzzles or environmental obstacles for us to overcome with our Pokemon. And we have that. And not only do we have that, but we have it constantly, because every time you see an ore and every time you see an item on the ground, you can throw your Pokemon out and they can grab it or break it for you, whatever it is that they need to do. It's so fun and it's so fluid. The game is so smooth. Whether you're traversing the land fast on a Pokemon or running or multitasking, whatever it is, you can just keep going straight forward while doing all these things on the side. It never stutters. I very rarely saw frame drops, and it was only in battles, and it was only with a lot of effects on the screen. I don't think I really saw frame drops otherwise, like at all. It's really smooth. You can tell that's what they put the most work into when they made this game, which is completely different for Game Freak, and I'm so happy about it. Granted, I know Monolith Soft had a huge hand in this game, but I still am grateful nonetheless, because that means Game Freak must be learning, and that means this can be a new baseline, hopefully, for future titles. I know Game Freak has a reputation of bringing ideas and mechanics in and then completely dropping them, and I fully expect that to happen here. I fully expect it, and I hope to goodness I am wrong, because this is all, honestly, at this point, the bare minimum, but the bare minimum is so good that this game just feels so perfect to me. And I just don't want them to drop anything that they have here. I want them to expand on it. That's what they need to do. It's not like a turn-based RPG where you can kind of change it up from game to game. No, this is an action game with turn-based RPG elements. And with that, it's a lot harder to take things away, because people are going to talk about the gameplay might feel less fluid or less good in the next entry by comparison if you take things away from an action game. So they hopefully will not be taking things away for future titles. Unless it's maybe a remake, I can see them trying to be more traditional for those just because they want to be more faithful. But hopefully it's not as faithful as BDSP, because that got boring real fast. At least for me it did. Now, let's talk about the gameplay loop in general. And I want to go over the fact that it is fun and satisfying from start to finish to just go around with your Pokemon, catching Pokemon, trying to figure out the best way to catch these Pokemon, because every Pokemon's different. And you also need to, find what their favorite foods are, because they won't eat certain foods and you can't lure them. And you also have to be able to find some sort of way to sneak up behind them if you want a guaranteed catch, or beat them in a fight and try to catch them that way, especially the alphas. And oh my goodness, is it satisfying catching an alpha. I have a lot of alphas, and it's like each one of them is a story. Like, I have an alpha Magikarp who was probably the easiest one to catch, but I couldn't get him to obey me because he was too overleveled. So I was like, okay, this guy doesn't want to listen. And we had this whole arc together where I was trying to get him to do stuff, and every once in a while he would attack. I evolved him into a Gyarados, and every once in a while he would attack, but then most of the time he wouldn't. So I was like, okay, well, how about this? I'm going to send you over to this farm back at the village, and you can work a hard living there until you want to obey me. So I left him there to do some watering at the village with one of the NPCs, and you see him out in the open. It's really cool. When you give the NPCs Pokemon, you see them out in the open. And I just left him and leveled up, got a higher rank, and now he can obey me. And I took him back and I was like, have you learned your lesson? And it's like, Gyarados has put his heart and soul into work, and I take him, and then now he's a great asset to my team. It's like we had this whole story arc just like in the Pokemon anime. It was great. So things like that can happen, and it's so good. But again, I was talking about the gameplay loop. I should probably get back into that. Catching the Pokemon and having these adventures with them is so smooth and satisfying. And then you get into crafting, which is pivotal because you'll be running out of balls and lures and smoke bombs a lot. And healing items, because when you're out on these excursions, you don't want to constantly be going back to the base camp, and sometimes you can't. If a Pokemon sees you can't warp back to a base camp. You can probably get on your traversal option and ride back, but you still run the risk of other Pokemon spotting you, and you can't heal until you're not spotted by a Pokemon for a good amount of time. So if another Pokemon hits you off of your ride Pokemon, then you're kind of screwed. Luckily, I mostly managed to get away. I didn't die until the game until recently, and the reason I died was during a boss battle. And it was the final boss battle of the main campaign, or I guess it wasn't the final boss battle, it was the final noble Pokemon of the main campaign. And they just, they actually killed me a good 3 or 4 times before I won. And I love it. It was actually challenging, and not only just that boss fight, the game in general is pretty challenging. It's not like because I didn't die, I don't think the game is difficult. I'm just good at action games, and I'm also decent at Pokemon in general. But it's not like I didn't get close. I've almost died in this game so many times. It's not easy to survive per se. And it's great for that. I think it's a great balance of difficulty. Gathering the materials, like I mentioned, you do with your Pokemon, and you need that for crafting. So it's a really fun loop of going out, catching Pokemon, gathering material, crafting things to go back out and catch more Pokemon and craft more materials to do it in all these different ways. And of course, progress the story. I think the story fits in really well because it's unintrusive, but it's also interesting enough to keep you going. And where I'm at now, I haven't finished the main campaign, but I'm almost finished with it, and I've noticed the story has been escalated the entire time. So the game has been getting better from start to finish. Speaking of which, I want to say this game definitely put its worst foot forward first. The first part of this game, the first hour and a half, I want to say, was really slow. It was a lot slower than I expected. I expected it to be a little less hand-holdy, but it was pretty hand-holdy, but also not as hand-holdy as previous Pokemon games, because it did let you run around and have freedom in how you caught things and what have you, for the most part, except for the part where you have to catch 3 Bidoof in a row or something. That was probably the worst brunt of it. And then there's a lot of dialogue, and I get it. There's a lot of new mechanics they needed to tell us about, and that's fine, although I would have preferred an option to just figure it out on my own. Of course, that's something we've always wanted from Game Freak's Pokemon games, but they still won't give it to us. And then on top of that, there's a lot of story that they need to start doing exposition for. And I think they did decently at that, especially with the opening cutscene. I was really happy with how they introduced us to the world of this game. And it's just, like I said, satisfying from start to finish. And as you progress through the story, you get more traversal options and you get more, expanded inventory and things like that. And it just adds to this feeling of you're getting better, you're getting more powerful, and you're really realizing what this world is and what it has to offer, and you can do better with that to do better with catching the Pokemon, and of course in pertaining to the story, do better for this world, which is very it has a lot of strife over living with Pokemon and trying to survive. Like, a lot of characters here have really sad backstories. Like, they had families that died from Pokemon attacks, and they have friends that have died in the Survey Corps and things like that, and now they're just trying to prevent that. Like, Captain Silene tells us over and over again, don't die. And it becomes, kind of like this, wow, these people have these really sad backstories, and they care about me as the character more than just being their savior. They care about me as a person. And I find that very intriguing in itself. I guess I may as well talk about the story now, because I'm kind of getting into it. And I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, because I myself haven't even finished the main campaign. But as I mentioned, it's escalated from start to finish, and I find it to be a pretty good story. I heard it gets even better not only where I'm at, but also in the post game. So I'm so excited to see that. Let me know what you guys think about the story and all down in the comments. Just please try to keep it spoiler free, because like I said, I haven't finished the game, and I imagine other people out there might be some people who haven't gotten the game yet because they, are waiting for a paycheck or something. So let's just try to be understanding about that. Now, the menus are another thing that I really love. I've been saying for the longest time that Pokemon needs translucent menus, and here they are. Translucent menus galore, everywhere. Every menu is translucent, whether it's the battle menu, whether it's the crafting menu, the items menu, the pastures menu, all of it's translucent. So it doesn't take you too far out of the world, and I really love that. The battle menus are so satisfying when you're pressing things and you hear this like clank sound. Oh my gosh, I love it. When you choose strong and agile style, and then when you activate them, oh, it is so nice. And the menus and the UI in general just contributes to the overall aesthetic and pleasure of viewing this game. And I really appreciate the work that they've put into that. Now, there is one gripe I have. I don't know if this is a UI complaint or how I would categorize this, but when you're in the battles, I do wish we could control the camera a little more. I always feel like it's angled upward a little too much, especially when I have small Pokemon out. I kind of want to get an angle where I can see the small Pokemon in full and my trainer and the opposing Pokemon, and I can never really quite get that. I've tried to get it as much as possible. There's like a focus button you can do too that gives you a little bit of a different angle, but that's really all you can do is just rotate the camera 360 degrees around, not too far up and down, and then you can't move the camera like from like a more crouched position to, or to a more crouched position, I should say, which is a shame. But when, and especially it's really bad when small Pokemon are out and when large Pokemon are out. Medium Pokemon have like the happy medium, and floating Pokemon have a happy medium, but it is hard with other kinds to get a good angle to really view everything. But it is fun because you can walk around and view from any angle you want at the same time, so you can, you can play around with that, and that's definitely better than nothing, and it's better than what we've had before. So yeah, a weird complaint, but it is something that I noticed, and I don't know how to categorize it, so I just kind of threw it in here. The music, oh my gosh. The music in this game, like I mentioned earlier, there's that guy who said there's stray piano tracks in the game. And I'm like, how do you view these as stray piano tracks? There's so many different instruments that are used, and there's actual melodies, unlike Breath of the Wild. Like, that was one of my biggest gripes with Breath of the Wild, was it didn't have like melodic tracks playing as you traversed. It was only when you reached towns, and even those are very subdued. But here, you get like 2 or 3 tracks per day, 2 or 3 tracks per night, and they're different depending on what location you are. So like, say the Coastlands has 2 or 3 tracks per day, two or 3 tracks per night, and then you go to the Obsidian Fieldlands, and that has 2 or 3 tracks per day and 2 or 3 tracks per night. It's completely different. And then every area is like that. Like, they each have their own tracks, and I love it. I guess the nighttime tracks are the same everywhere, but the daytime tracks, there's like 2 or 3 for each area that are different from every other area. And they're all really good and really varied. Like, I would show you an example, but I don't know how copyright is. You'll know it when you play the game. It's pretty in your face. Like, just being out in the levels and even being in town, the music is not straight piano sounds. It's melodic tracks that have, you know, a bunch of different phases to them and things like that. Like, it's really good, and I don't understand how people can confuse that with stray piano keys playing like Breath of the Wild. It's no, not at all, not even close. Now the level design of the areas are very, very well done. My least favorite is probably the Mirelands, but even that has things that I love about it. Like, all of the areas are so nice. My favorite is probably the ice area, and you guys have seen it a bit in trailers if you haven't seen it in game yet. It's the biggest, the coolest, the most... I find it so fun to traverse, and it's so beautiful, especially with the skybox. So the skybox is great across the board at no matter which location you're at, but it looks particularly great in the ice area. It's very magical. You guys are gonna know what I'm talking about when you get there. Like the lighting, the way it hits the snow and the skybox hits everything. It's so beautiful. So that's to be said. The level design is made very cleverly to where, you know, these are like memorable areas, memorable spots. You can find little nicely woven areas that are memorable, all put together in each area. So it's kind of like Breath of the Wild in that respect. How do I word this? I don't know if I'm wording this properly. Like, it's not just a big open expanse that feels barren. It's a bunch of small, little focused areas all woven together to make a giant sandbox, if that makes sense. So everywhere is fairly memorable. I also appreciate the focus on progression for each area when it comes to the level design, because, you know, you're there the first time, you don't have all the traversal options, and you experience this area, this giant sandbox, if you will, in a certain way. And then later on, you unlock a traversal option, and then you can go back to that area and experience it in a completely new fashion. It's insane how much thought they put into that. Like, you can tell that they thought about this from start to finish. I'm genuinely shocked. This game had to have been in development for quite some time. There's no way it started development as recently as a lot of people are speculating. I think this was at least 3 to 5 years in the making. And I want to say more than 3 years. Like, people were speculating 2 to 3 years, but I want to say it might have been like 5 years in the making. They may have been working on this for quite a while, and maybe it got better once they moved into Nintendo's offices, you know, and had Monolith Soft's help. So there was probably a baseline that was set beforehand, and then they got the help that they needed. That might have also been part of the reason they moved into Nintendo's offices, to make this sort of project and future projects that are like this easier for themselves. For Game Freak, if you guys didn't keep up with my train of thought there. But yeah, to accentuate all this, side quests are another thing thrown in to just like spice things up. And the side quests in this game are so fun. I haven't had this much fun with side quests since Nier Automata. Sure, Nier Automata had the like philosophical and existential side quests, and that's why those were interesting, because they really made you think. But this one, it has like these memorable adventures with the people and their Pokemon. And then when you have these quests that NPCs ask for Pokemon for, they will keep those Pokemon. That's one of my favorite parts about this. And again, this was another thing I asked for in that one video that I mentioned, where I was talking about different things I wanted with Pokemon interactivity in the game. I mentioned that I wanted, you know, to have side quests with NPCs and to be able to catch a Pokemon for them and give that to them to keep. And they literally did that in this game. They read my mind. I mean, this whole game in general is something that they read my mind on, because I remember playing Sword and Shield's DLC and seeing like that giant dinosaur Pokemon, I forget what it's called, Tyrantrum, and thinking like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if that Tyrantrum was actually a danger to me right now, because it's so big and scary and I had to sneak around it or something. They would never make a game like that, come on. And then bam, here is Pokemon Legends. But this is just a wet dream for me. But I probably sound like I'm rambling, but I'm just full of excitement, and man, they just did so well with this. And not gonna lie, There were some slightly philosophical side quests, and also where I'm at in the story right now is getting slightly philosophical, which is really cool, but I'm not going to spoil anything. I hope you guys are excited to have actual depth to your Pokemon stories. It's kind of great. The characters are great. I, of course, love Volo. I made that very clear before the game even released, but there's a lot of characters that I didn't even know about who I actually really love. And I actually ended up really loving Adaman way more than I thought I would as a character. So I really, really like the characters, and especially where I'm at in the story now, it really feels like I've seen them grow and really show different sides to themselves that I didn't expect to see, honestly. And then the NPCs, even for the side quests and stuff, like they have a lot of personality and stuff, so I really like that. But yeah, there's so much more to say. So much more to say. I probably forgot so many things because there's so much to talk about. But you know what? I'm going to be doing a vodcast with my usual crew, with Veteran X and Dusty Gogoat and Kayla's Capsule. So you guys can hear more thoughts from all of us there when that comes out. Man, are you guys enjoying the game as much as I am? I really hope you are. I really hope we can talk about it down in the comments, because I need people to talk about this with, because I've just been holding all this in. People are asking me in Twitter DMs and stuff like, how are you enjoying the game? And I'm like, I'm really trying to process that first before I tell anybody. And here's just me overflowing my thoughts in a video to you guys. And I hope you enjoyed it. You know, yeah, I've been johtojonny, and I hope that my happiness with this game is contagious. I hope that we're all having so much fun. And until the next video, I will see you guys later. Peace out.